again, after 6 years, I'm back. But within those 6 years, I have been actively working with the same advocacy, and that is helping overseas Filipino workers in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Macau. My main strategy is customizing training courses for them, and at the same time, as much as possible, train all families in the Philippines. I want them to change their mindset that they can also become entrepreneurs and employers. So, and the last mile of every work that we do overseas is reunification or reuniting with their respective families in the Philippines. Yes, so thank you for inviting me again, Richard. So for today, I will be speaking about the overseas Filipino workers as our more modern day heroes. Why are they called modern day heroes? The unsung heroes. And during the pandemic, much support was given to them by the government in terms of providing quarantine facilities and other medical assistance. But is that all that is needed by our OFWs? Support during times of calamities like COVID. So during the last year and this year, I was looking at other ways of helping our kababayans. And while I was doing already training and education on financial literacy and entrepreneurship, I thought that more should be done, not only by non-government organizations, but also by the government agencies and civil society. So for today, I will be focusing more on why are they called modern day heroes or unsung heroes. So as you can see, the remittance, I would focus on remittances. So when we look at the remittances, we only think of remittances, the use of remittances by the household. We should also think about the use of remittances by the country. So when we look at the household, what is the effect of remittances to the OFW families? Of course, it improves the standard of or the quality of life of OFW families. With the remittances, they're able to send their children to school, better schools. They're able to access basic social services, because even if there's free access, sometimes you have to pay for it. Education, medical assistance, and the like. And with proper training and education, they can also set up their own businesses or family enterprises while working abroad. And the other one is accessing insurance for the families. So these are some of the effects of the use of remittances by the OFWs and the families. When we look at the country, well, it is, already known that remittances are said to be saving us from serious economic recession. And second is the Philippines is one of the highest remittance receiving countries in the world. We are actually ranked fourth next to India, China, and the other one is India, China, and Mexico. Okay, so it's India, China, Mexico, and the Philippines in terms of the amount of remittances received by the labor sending countries, in our case, the Philippines. So when we look at the remittances, during the pandemic, many have already forecasted that remittances would go down, and that it would affect our the growth of our gross domestic product and the gross national product. Even the central bank forecasted that 5%, there will be a 5% fall in the growth of the GDP, which later on they changed to 2%. But I will present later on that it did not happen. The remittances remain stable, and our overseas Filipino workers continued sending money to their families in the Philippines despite the pandemic. Not only in terms of frequency or the number of times that they're sending, but also in terms of volume, the amount of money that they're sending to their families. There are 12 million Filipinos working overseas. And when you look at these 12 million Filipinos, it means 12 million households receiving remittances from abroad. Okay, so when we look at the amount of remittances that flow in the country, as you can see, from 2018 to 2019, there was marked increase, significant increase in the volume of remittances received by the families and by the country. There's personal remittances. Personal remittances refer to those that have been transferred through platforms like remittance companies. There is cash remittances, and these are remittances that were deposited through commercial banks. So for example, in Singapore, these were those deposited in BDO, Philippine National Bank, BPI. These banks have offices in Singapore and also in Hong Kong and Macau. So these are the cash remittances that are referred to here. If you would notice in the table, from 2019 to 2020, 2020 is when there was pandemic. So before, BSP and the World Bank forecasted a 5% decline in growth of GNP and GDP. It did not happen. If you can see the difference between the remittances of 2018 and 2019, 2019 and 2020, there was only a 0.8% decline in the amount of and the volume of remittances received by the families and by the country during the pandemic. So despite the pandemic, the OFWs are able to send money back home, bigger in amount and more frequent. Okay, this means that for the country, while we were spending too much during the pandemics, this was balanced by the remittances received in the country. When we look at what are we doing for the OFWs before and during the pandemic? Before the pandemic, in the labor receiving countries, this refers to overseas. In the labor receiving countries, there are many non-government organizations, local and international, that are doing various programs and projects for the OFWs. For instance, in Singapore, there is Home, there's AIDA, there are other Filipino organizations giving training for OFWs. The training may not be free, some are giving it for free, but what's the effect of this training to our Filipino workers? We do not have evidences for that, but for our organization, ASCII Global, from 2010 to 2017, we were able to monitor the effect or the outcomes of the training to the overseas Filipino workers. From 2010 to 2017, we have trained about 7,000 overseas Filipino workers. The training was on financial literacy, communication, entrepreneurship, and personality development. And for each of the training, we measured the effects, qualitative effects of our training to the workers and their families back home. So we specifically noted the change in mindset and the way they do things and the way they deal with people. So when we look at the effect or the evidences of training to the lives of the Filipino workers and their families, for the Singapore OFWs, the effect was very significant. One is they were able to set up family enterprises. So while the OFWs working in Singapore, their families are starting to open enterprises and operate enterprises. And until this day, these enterprises are still there. So prior to the training, there was no family enterprise setup. Second is the OFWs also set up their own savings and investment club, independent of our organization. Some have invested in stocks, again, independent of our organization, but we're tracking it. Some are even able to invest in digital currencies, which until now, they are able to do it on their own independently. And the third one is families with large families, with unemployed brothers or sisters. They're able to operate their own family enterprises. The OFWs were able to set up a family enterprise for each of the unemployed workers. And we have names and evidences to what I am saying. In fact, one of them was cited as a best OFW entrepreneur from Cagayan province, and she was able to set up 5 family enterprises to be able to provide work or business for unemployed brothers and sisters. So that's the effect for the Singapore OFWs. When we look at the effect on this second organization that I have worked with, it's a different approach because the approach was more on the spiritual transformation. The organization believes that the OFWs should acknowledge that whatever resources that are there overseas do not belong to them. It belongs to God, and they should be responsible financial stewards. So with that objective, we have customized a training for them that would embrace both financial and entrepreneurial capabilities, and at the same time, spiritual transformation. I worked with the various Christian churches in Hong Kong. And what's happening is after every service, I would sit down with the Filipino congregation and teach them basic financial management. And I call it financial stewardship. But when you look at it, it's more of a biblical finance, biblical finance. What I am stressing here is there is no blanket or one approach to training of OFWs and even their families. One has to be clear what is the objective before rolling out a specific training or education program for the OFW. So for Hong Kong and Macau, it is very clear that we want spiritual transformation to happen. So all topics, all modules were laced with biblical principles. So the main foundation was really John 10:10. And if I may cite here, John 10:10 is the quote. To quote John 10:10, it's, "The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come to give you life and life to the full." So that's the biblical foundation, meaning to say they have to be wise and be responsible for the earnings that they make in their work abroad. So some of the objectives were, one, the OFWs in Hong Kong and Macau should be able to have their own savings club, or their own savings group, so that at the end of their contract, or if they want to go back home, they have something, they have funds to bring back home. And as of now, we have formed those savings group. Each of the churches would have specific savings group, maybe 3 to 5 savings group in a church. We work with 7 churches in Hong Kong and about 5 churches in Macau. The second objective is they should also be starting to think about setting up family enterprises. And some are able to set up their own family enterprises. And the third one, of course, is the spiritual transformation, realizing that this is all from someone up above, and they should be responsible stewards of whatever resources that are given or made available to them. What is noteworthy that I would want to share with you is that based on the feedback from the churches in Hong Kong, during the training ran for about 4 to 6 months. During the training was still ongoing, but the giving was increasing, the tithing. It was increasing, significantly increasing. Meaning to say, so they were asking me, what were you teaching, the students? But, there was really no conscious approach to tell them to increase their giving. So I attributed it to, a change in the way they look at things, or the change in mindset. And that's my advocacy, changing the mindset. So, in that way, the remittances, with the proper training and education, customized training for families and workers abroad, we are able to achieve our objectives. This is about training and education. But is this all what is needed by our modern day heroes? As I go around these countries, I see them, every Sunday, and there are still some information that they need and that are obviously not there. What are these? Maybe other information that could be gathered from OWA or from POEA. I myself do not have this information. I come to these countries with a view that I am delivering the training to them, of course in consultation and in coordination or collaboration with the Philippine Embassy in those countries. But it seems that the OFWs still need some information, the where to go to in case they need this information. And what they're telling me is they're confused about the functions of each of the government agencies that they know. So what I would like to emphasize is for OWA and for POEA and for the government in general to enhance or to improve the pre and the post-departure orientation seminar. So giving all the information that is needed by the OFWs, and expanding further the financial. They're also giving financial literacy, but it's only for a matter of few hours. You cannot achieve your objective with a training that would only last 1 or 2 hours. So maybe the non-government organizations and the civil society that have training courses or educational programs for overseas Filipino workers and their families should need to work together to come up with one approach on one approach or a unified approach in helping our overseas Filipino workers. In fact, the last organization that I worked with, we have started establishing an OFW help desk. In the idea or the plan is to have an OFW help desk in every municipality. But because of COVID, we were only able to establish 2 OFW help desks in Iloilo. We were also planning to launch this OFWs in distress can easily access services from OWA and POEA using this app. So, as you know, there are many cases of abuse happening abroad, but the OFWs would take about days, weeks, or months before they are able to go to the embassy. Unfortunately, with the pandemics, we were not able to expand this program and offer it to as many OFWs as possible. But one thing that we have made great accomplishment on before the pandemic is training the families of the seafarers in Iloilo. So when they came, because there were about 400,000 repatriated seafarers in the Philippines during the pandemic, some of them were from Iloilo. So hopefully, they were able to set up their own businesses because the families have started training on entrepreneurship. So my last word is for us concerned organizations and agencies in the Philippines to look at the possibility of unifying and coming up with one coordinated approach to helping our OFWs. We're grateful for the government in providing assistance during the pandemic, but after that, what will happen? So in the last 6 months, we have trained 6 batches of repatriated OFWs through the OWA Balik Kabayanihan program. So I am still mentoring and coaching some of them in setting up their own businesses. And I'm also blessed to know that government agencies like OWA, Department of Agriculture, Department of Science and Technology, Department of Trade and Industry, and Small Business Guarantee and Finance Corporation offered loan assistance from zero interest to very low interest rate to repatriated OFWs who will be able to set up their own businesses. And the requirement is there should be a mentor and a business plan that go with the loan application. And that's what we are doing at the moment. So, I mean, efforts like this, I mean, the government should look at expanding programs like the Balik Kabayanihan program. And more importantly, look at other aspects so that our modern day heroes or the unsung heroes are really protected, cared for, and served very well. We know that their remittances is saving us from serious economic depression. So thank you very much for this time. Thank you very much for Asia CEO organization for caring for the OFWs by setting up this forum so that our voices would also be heard by other like-minded organizations and agencies in the Philippines and maybe outside the country. Thank you very much.